Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. What I want to do is just take a few minutes and see if I can adjust this just a little bit. There we go. I want to take a few minutes of your time and talk to you about how you can use social media and the internet to actually drive media coverage of your company. And I'm going to talk fairly generically when I say your company. I'm going to talk about, what I mean is your company, its products, its people, pretty much all the things that you would like to see positive media coverage about that could help drive your business interests. Okay? That said, I've broken what I'm going to talk to you about into two large buckets, if you will. The first part, kind of an introduction, I refer to it as courting Clark Kent. Obviously, I'm being a bit tongue-in-cheek. Clark Kent, I just mean as a metaphor for reporters in general. Although courting, the word courting, I mean it somewhat literally, and I'll explain why in just a second. And then when I talk to you about what you can do to use social media and the internet to drive reporter interest, media interest, and coverage in your company, I'm going to use a mnemonic device that journalists themselves use. I get to hear it a lot up at UCO because the journalism program is, or as we call it now, the professional media program is housed with us. It's the basic things that you always want to have in a news story, the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, and why. Okay, so I'm going to use that to kind of lay out the things I recommend you do to try and get media coverage for your company using social media. Okay? So the reason I talk about courting Clark Kent is this. When you're trying to develop a good media relations program, trying to drive a good, if you will, a publicity program for your company, you want to think a bit about it as in terms of relationship building. Every good media program I've ever seen where companies get regular, fairly routine coverage of their companies, fairly positive coverage of their companies, it's because the people who were responsible for running that program looked at it or thought of it as a relationship. They didn't think about it in terms of one-offs, in terms of, I have this news release, I want to get it in the paper. I have this story, I want to see it covered. We have a new product to launch coming out, or we've hired someone new, we want to get it covered. Don't get me wrong, all those things are perfectly legitimate for you to want, but the way you get that done is you think about it in terms, or you think about your relationships with the reporters and with the media in terms of what can you do for them, what's in it for them. Okay, if you think of it that way, always think about it from their perspective, you will find that the results you get in trying to generate your own publicity will increase significantly. 3 P's you always want to think about in terms of what I'm about to say to you. The first P is for platforms, and by platforms I mean social media platforms, digital platforms, things like Facebook and Twitter and so forth, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. And then the other 2 P's, and I cannot stress this enough, which is why you're going to see it more than once in this presentation, patience and persistence. What I'm about to suggest you do, the good news is that if you do it, it costs you next to nothing or nothing monetarily. It really won't cost, I'm hard pressed to think of any cost you would incur. It does take time and patience. It's not something that's going to work overnight, but if you take the long view and you work with it, you will find that it succeeds more often than it doesn't. By the way, a little confession I should make. If you see me glance backwards occasionally, I've got a timer running on myself on my phone. My wife of 17 years informed me last night that I can be a bit long-winded, and I don't want to take that out on you. So if you see me glance this way occasionally, that's why. Let me start with those 5 W's I talked about. The first one is the who. Who should you target? Well, who you should target in terms of reporters and media outlets, think of it this way. Obviously, there are certain newspapers, magazines, websites, trade publications that cover your businesses, right? Which ones you should target, obviously the question of which one are your audiences reading. Now when I say your audiences, I suspect in a lot of cases we're talking your customers, but there may be some other audiences that you need to be mindful of in your business. For example, if you work in a highly regulated business like energy, it might be regulators, it might be public officials, but whoever your audience may be, customers, regulators, whoever, you always want to look at it from the standpoint of who are they reading? Who are my customers reading? Who are my audiences reading? And how do you know that? Simple. Start finding out, start looking into where they are, your customers, your audience. See where they are on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so forth. And see who they follow, what reporters they follow, what media outlets they follow. How do you know who they're following? One way is you can just look, for example, on Twitter. Most people, you can just see who do they follow. You can just go right through their list of people and the feeds they're following. But more importantly, look to see whose stuff, whose articles, whose blogs who are they posting to their social media feeds, okay? Who are they sharing on their Facebook pages? Whose stories are they retweeting on Twitter or posting on their LinkedIn feeds, okay? People, you know, it's amazing. It's good and bad, you know, the fact that we live in an age now where people pretty much are, they're just really forthcoming with the stuff they'll share about themselves on social media, aren't they? I spend a lot of time with 19 and 20-year-olds, and boy, some of the stuff they share on social media is just, thank God my 88-year-old mother is not on social media. She would be appalled. But seriously, on a more serious note, people, when it comes to their business views of who influences them, the journalists and so forth, the reporters that they follow, whose words they hang on, if you will, you can find that out pretty readily, okay? And the first thing, here we go. First thing you want to do as part of this is you want to figure out who are the top, up here I say 5 to 10. I'll be honest with you, 10's a big, big number. Probably you want to start out, just think about maybe the 4, 5, 6, no more than that, reporters, be they trade reporters, newspaper reporters, whoever, that your customers, your audiences, who are they following, who are they posting, who are they commenting on a lot, be it on the newspaper, be it on the media outlet website itself, or through other social media platforms, or through their blogs. Who are they commenting on, and then start following them, start reading those people regularly, figuring out what are they writing about? Yes, they cover your industry, they cover your business, but what are the specific topics within your industry that they're talking about, writing about the most, okay? What are their opinions? Even in news pieces, you can sometimes get a feel for what a reporter's take on a situation is by the way, you know, by the volume of coverage that he or she gives to certain stories, okay? The good news here when you're doing this research to figure out, you know, who to follow and where to follow them is that nowadays most reporters, I mean, they are all in when it comes to participating in social media. They use social media as a channel. They can get their stories out or their blog posts out. They can get them out in front of their audience. In some cases, they use it as a supplement. I've been really taking note the last few years, for example, of how many reporters, be they business reporters, foreign affairs reporters, who if they're covering any kind of live event or live happening, they'll just start tweeting out. I mean, it's a little micro stories. They'll just start tweeting out right from the site, okay? And they go out of their way. They make it very easy for people to follow them. That's their job. They want you to follow them. So finding this information is actually, it's fairly easy to find by either going to the media websites themselves, and the reporters will tell you right where, you know, where their feeds are, or by just searching reporter names, like on a Facebook or on Twitter, what have you. They're fairly easy to find. Let me give you a quick example. Okay, so let's say if your industry, if Paul at the Oklahoman was one of the people that you know your customers or your audience members read, well, makes it pretty easy, and I'm going to step away from the mic, so please tell me if you can't hear me. I grew up in New York, so I'm told that I'm fairly loud. But if you want to follow Paul, right here, in addition to some information about him, here's his Twitter feed, here's his email, that little W is the WordPress symbol, I assume that's the link to his blog, and then this symbol here is how you can get an RSS feed and start following and having his stories when he publishes them come directly to you, okay? It's really pretty easy to figure out where you can find the reporters you care about online, be it social media, their own websites, their own blog posts, okay? One thing I would point out, most reporters, let's face it nowadays, most people, reporters and otherwise, are pretty active on what I call the big two of social media, Facebook and Twitter. But a lot of other social media websites are also good places to use as platforms to start establishing these relationships with media professionals that you want to build relationships with. For example, anyone who does anything in business, obviously LinkedIn is a site to be on nowadays. If you know your reporter's a broadcast reporter, particularly someone who deals in video a lot, YouTube. Most every national and local outlet has their own channel on YouTube nowadays. If your business has anything to do with things like fashion, home decor, food, certain other topics, Pinterest, lots of reporters. If you go to Pinterest, I mean, Cosmopolitan, Redbook, probably a lot of local magazines and outlets I'm not thinking to mention. They're very active in Pinterest, okay? Again, fairly easy to find these people and where they are on these sites. They'll pretty much go out of their way to tell you, okay? The one thing I would caution you on is always remember, you're building, or you want to build relationships with people, not with outlets. You can start by looking at the outlet itself, but then remember, you're always trying to narrow your search down to a person. You don't build relationships with newspapers or channels. You build them with individual people, the reporters themselves. Once you identify the who and the where, who you want to follow, where you need to follow them, then you want to basically do two things, and this is the what, to start establishing that relationship. The first thing you want to do is research. You want to watch and learn. Start reading, if you're not already doing it. Start reading what they post and what they write regularly. What do they cover? What are their, again, what are their top key topics of interest within your industry? If they write any commentary pieces, which a lot of them do, even if it's not in the news stories they write, a lot of times they'll have blogs that they use to supplement their writing. They'll be a bit more open with their opinions and their views. What are they saying there? Get as smart as you can about what these reporters think before you go to step 2, which is approach and interact. And what do I mean by approach and interact? I don't mean likes, and I say it pretty bluntly here, likes are fairly worthless. I'm not saying don't click like on an article if you do, I mean that's great, but in terms of trying to get attention, if you're following a reporter that has any size following at all, they're probably getting dozens if not hundreds of likes clicked on their stories when they read them, so you're not going to get noticed doing that. The way you get noticed, or the way you start to build this relationship, is by posting good comments. And what do I mean by good comments? I don't mean anything critical, and that's not, I don't mean, there may be cases once you're establishing a rapport where you can ask a question in a way, and I'm not even going to say do constructive criticism. You don't want to basically start, obviously if somebody the first time you met them, they come up and start criticizing you and attacking you, probably not going to be the best relationship you've ever had. By the same token, you don't want to pander to them either. I mean, you don't go, great article. I'm not saying you can't compliment them if it's a sincere compliment, but don't just start trying to schmooze. I mean, reporters aren't dumb. They can tell when you're just trying to schmooze them. What do I mean by good comments? Provide thoughtful in the sense that you think them through, comments that provide them with some information that shows that you've read their article, the article in question. You have some insights on what they're talking about. For example, you read an article about something, let's say, going on in downtown Oklahoma City, some business development, and let's say you've recently come in or you have contacts in, I'm making this up, in the Sacramento market, and you're familiar with a similar trend there. Maybe your comment is, hey Mike, that was a really interesting article. Are you familiar with how this particular trend is playing out in certain California markets? And maybe you put a link from the Sacramento Bee there. Again, you're not going to, no one thing you do in what I'm describing here is going to win the day for you, but if you start looking at it that way, where you can identify yourself as, so use social media as a way to show that you're someone who knows the market, who's knowledgeable, this is the way you're going to start to be able to build a relationship with a reporter, okay, with reporters, okay? Again, social media and digital websites, worry about what you can do for them, okay? Always keep the focus, when you start to contact them, when you start to reach out to them, what can you do for them? And use that as a way to bridge to more direct contact so that when the times come that you actually do need to reach out to them directly, you have a press release about something going on, a new product, a new CEO, what have you, the person, you're not just another person in a long line of anonymous people banging on their electronic door saying, notice me, I have something great to tell you. You will come across, you will get much better results when that time comes if you've already established yourself as someone who is a credible player, so to speak, in the industry that this person covers, okay? And again, remember, patience and persistence. This doesn't happen overnight. I'm not going to talk really much about deadlines. I mean, reporters always do work on deadlines, but if you're using social media to communicate with them, that happens, it doesn't happen in real time, so that's not as big a consideration. Publishing cycles, though, some, not all by any means, but some reporters tend to typically put up new blog posts or put up new content to social media on a somewhat regular cycle. If you notice that happening with the reporters you identify as being important to you, something to bear in mind is this: being the first person to comment on something is not going to guarantee it gets noticed by the person, by the writer. That said, being the first or among the first to comment certainly doesn't hurt. So if you can understand what their publishing cycles are online, that's not a bad piece of information to know. Again, I'm not saying it's going to win the day for you, but it's just one more thing that's good to know about the reporter if that's relevant to how he or she publishes. So let me wrap with this, the why. Why should you bother doing all of this? Now, as I said, it doesn't cost you anything, but you can probably tell if you do this and you stick with it, it's not a huge investment of time, but it's not an insignificant amount either. So why do it? Reporters, and I put the word or the phrase best friends in quotes, reporters' best friends, maybe a better way to put that is the people that reporters value the most as sources of information are the people who routinely show themselves to be good sources of information, for background information on the stories they're writing, for leads on certain aspects of stories or topics that they're covering on a regular basis. Doing what I prescribed here can help you identify yourself to them as that sort of person. And here's the thing, and I'll close with this. It not only increases your chances down the road for media coverage, it also helps you to start getting attention from the people within your own industry. And here's why. Remember what I said at the very, or near the very beginning, that one of the ways to identify the reporters you should be following and the reporters you should be trying to build relationships with? The reason that, one of the ways you do that is by looking at who your customers and your audiences are following. Well, if your audience, if your customers are following those reporters and you're engaging or commenting or posting on a regular basis to those reporters' feeds, guess what? Your audiences, your customers are going to see that before the reporter does anything about that. So that's just kind of sort of, if you think about it, icing on the cake in terms of getting some additional attention from other people in the industry for your company. So with that, I think we're going to do questions at the end for everybody, so thanks for your time.